to the Kolkata City Dialogues. We are here to discuss climate change. One only has to turn on the radio or the television to hear the words climate change. Not all of us understand what is meant by that fact. What we do know, however, are the basic facts. Namely, that the Earth now is warmer than it has been at any point in the last 650,000 years. Scientists tell us that there is a direct correlation between the warming of the Earth and the release since the industrialization of the planet of greenhouse gases due to the burning of fossil fuels, namely oil, gas and coal. Top scientists across the world are united in their concern about climate change and its impact on human beings and biodiversity. They are so concerned that they now have an agreement and understanding released in the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's most recent report, which states the following, to paraphrase: the Earth is getting warmer, human beings are responsible, and the situation is much worse than we had thought before. It's time to act. This morning we went around the city to try and find out what ordinary people understood of the phrase climate change and global warming. We're now going to be showing you some footage from this Vox Pop, the voices of the people that we took.
See, we in central Calcutta, I think we possibly can feel the climate change and this global warming thing or environmental pollution, as you can say, more than anybody else. Actually, the kind of cacophony you can hear and the kind of, air pollution, I personally have to take an inhaler every day. So I think a number of solutions can be suggested at this very moment. One is that, why are these vehicles not properly checked? Why are they emitting such obnoxious fumes? That is one thing that must be done. Secondly, I think even people are not aware. Even right around, if you just turn around, you'll see so many people carrying these plastic bags and everything. So actually, awareness is another thing that has to be done, and this is one thing that is actually creating another problem. We just saw in the papers that, the airport area is going to be increased, we're going to have more aeroplanes, etc., etc. Something needs to be done, this development without any kind of planning is leading to disaster.
The global warming due to this, the consequences, the average temperature is rising, which, if goes on unchecked, the entire Arctic and Antarctic circles will melt. As a result, the entire Earth will get drowned.
গ্লোবাল ওয়ার্মিং সম্বন্ধে আমার যা মনে হয় অনেকগুলো রিজন আছে এর মধ্যে। সেটা হচ্ছে একটা হচ্ছে গাড়ির যে আমাদের এমিশনগুলো হয়, কার্বন এমিশন, কার্বন মনোক্সাইড, কার্বন ডাইঅক্সাইড, সেগুলো চারপাশে আমাদের যে একটা কভার করে রাখে, যার জন্য আমাদের হিট যেটা আসে, সোলার হিট আসার পরে ট্রান্সমিটেড হতে পারে না, যার জন্য একটা অবভিয়াসলি একটা আর্থের সারফেসটা একটা টেম্পারেচার একটা জায়গায় পৌঁছে যায়, যার জন্য একটা গ্লোবাল ওয়ার্মিং এর ব্যাপার চলে আসে। সিমিলারলি ডিফরেস্টেশনটাও একটা বড় রিজন এই গ্লোবাল ওয়ার্মিং এর।
প্রতি বছর গরম বাড়ছে, প্রতি বছর বা 1 ডিগ্রি 2 ডিগ্রি করে বাড়ছে। 43, 44 তো দেখেই যাচ্ছি। গাছ কেটে তো কলকাতা শহরটাকে মোটামুটি খালি করে ফেলেছে। পলিউশন লেভেলের তো কোনো মা বাপ নেই। মানিকতলা মনে 15 মিনিট দাঁড়িয়ে থাকলে চোখ জ্বালা করে একটা অকথ্য সিচুয়েশন তৈরি হয়।
কিন্তু আগে যে ওয়েদার ছিল কমফোর্টেবল, সেটা প্রথমেই খুব অস্বস্তিকর একটা পরিবেশ হয়েছে। প্রত্যেকেই খুব কষ্টের মধ্যে বাস করছি, খুব তাপটা জ্বালা করছে। আগে যে সূর্যের তাপে যে ছিল, এখন জ্বালা ভাবটা বেশি হয়। স্বাভাবিক আর সব ধরনের কষ্ট আমরা শারীরিক অস্বস্তিটা খুব বোধ করি। আসলে দূষণটা এত নিয়ন্ত্রণের বাইরে চলে যাচ্ছে, যার জন্য এটা হচ্ছে। দূষণটা যদি নিয়ন্ত্রণ করা যায় তাহলে এটা কিছুটা কমবে বলে আশা করা যাচ্ছে। আমরা যারা বাজারে আছি, অনেকেই আমরা দেখি খালি হাতে বাজার করতে আসে, এবং যারা বাজারে বিক্রি করবে তাদের একটা প্লাস্টিকের ব্যাগ না হলে যেন আমার চলছে না। কিন্তু প্লাস্টিকের ব্যাগ যখন ছিল না, ক্যারি ব্যাগ যখন ছিল না, আমরা কিন্তু প্রত্যেকেই বাজার করতাম। এখন ফ্যাসিলিটি পেয়ে এমন একটা অবস্থায় আমরা এসছি, তাতে এখন মনে হচ্ছে না, দূষণ আমার জন্য আর কতটুকু দূষণ হবে। এই ভাবনাটা আমাদের খুব বড় আকারে ধরেছে। কিন্তু আমরা প্রত্যেকেই যদি একটু একটু করে দূষণের কথা রোধ করার চেষ্টা করি, তাহলে সামগ্রিকভাবে কিন্তু দূষণটা নিয়ন্ত্রণ করা সম্ভব।
There seems to be some confusion between environmental changes and climate change. If you can please illuminate that.
The need to understand the greenhouse effect and distinguish greenhouse effect from failure in pollution control becomes very important. In fact, some of the cleanest cities in terms of pollution control are some of the biggest polluters in terms of greenhouse effect.
And I think it's very important to send out the clear message that environmental impacts at the local level are quite distinct from the climate instability that we're talking about when we talk about global climate change. I'd now like to turn very briefly to Mr. Mukhopadhyay. Would you like to add something to that point to illustrate the difference?
Now, 50% of the population of India are without electricity. Over 75% of household energy consumption is for the basic human need of cooking only. And over 70% of households use traditional biomass for their cooking. And all this activity give us greenhouse gases. Now, I have some more statistics I would enter into that. But whatever process we are following, the worst hit and worst type of situations are being faced by the people who are poor and below the poverty line. And it's the national objective target to bring them up to a level where they can confront the situations we are exposed in.
We're now going to turn to some more footage. We've heard of the disproportionate negative impacts of climate change on the lives of poor and marginalized communities. We next have some footage from the Sundarbans, where we're going to look at how some of the projected impacts of climate change, such as increased sea level rise, as well as increased salinity, the encroaching of salt water into land areas, is beginning to affect the lives, the livelihoods of people living in the Sundarbans. The river Ganga meets the Bay of Bengal in a maze of rivulets and islands, forming the world's largest mangrove delta. This is the Sundarbans. Declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 1984, the southernmost borders of India and Bangladesh run along this region. Its ecological fragility and the dangers it faces today are a matter of mounting concern. Already, 19,000 acres of forest land has been submerged. 4 islands have been submerged in 30 years by rising waters. Salinity has increased dramatically in rivers and aquifers. Experts believe there is enough scientific evidence to link this to climate change, which is raising sea levels dangerously high in the Bay of Bengal. The Sundarbans, which means beautiful forest in the local language, is home to the Sundari tree, known botanically as Heritaria faunus, amongst the most important of the other surviving mangrove species. In addition to the Royal Bengal tiger, the Sundarbans has an extraordinary wealth of flora and fauna. The wild boar, the barking and spotted deer, 226 species of birds, and over 20 species of snakes have their natural habitats here. All are threatened, along with the Sundari tree itself, by increased salinity and rising sea levels. Added to this is the economic pressure that leads to the regular felling of Sundari trees by the local population, often left with few options but to chop down their remaining natural resources. For these communities, fishing is their major source of livelihood. The Sundari trees provide vital ecosystem functions here too, with nutrients from their leaves feeding fish larvae in the waters below. But along with the entire aquatic ecosystem, fishing is under threat, in particular of the commercially attractive tiger prawn seedling sector, whose collection alone involves 4 million people. Tectonic shifts have also affected the bottom of the sea in the Sundarbans, with the unique forest cover increasingly migrating towards Bangladesh. The future of many islands in the Sundarbans is uncertain. The 4 islands of Kapashgori, Bedford, Supari Bhanga and Lohachara are already submerged. Smaller islands like Bhangadwari and Ghoramara are losing 20 hectares of land every year. For the larger Sagar Islands, this figure is 45 hectares. The Sundarbans have recorded a sea level rise of 3.14 millimeters, dangerously higher than the world average of 2 millimeters. By 2060, 15% of the Sundarbans will probably be lost, along with 17% of Bangladesh. But sea level rise is one of the most dynamic areas of climate science.
and new discoveries of the more rapid melting of the Greenland and Antarctic ice sheets than expected could bring such estimates far forward. Sea level rise, coastal erosion, and the destruction of the mangroves, the greatest protection against the effects of cyclones in the Bay of Bengal, are not just of concern to the rural hinterland, but to major urban centres such as Kolkata. Here the mangroves perform a special function for the city, filtering the dangerous sewage and heavy metals from Kolkata and its industrial suburbs. With their destruction, this biofiltration function, which saves the city crores of rupees, will be lost. The economic contribution of the Sundarbans, in terms of food, fisheries and tourism, to West Bengal is also considerable. The changes that we are seeing here should give the state's policymakers strong reasons for concern.
কোথা থেকে আসছে এই যে গাছপালা কোথা থেকে আসছে সুন্দরবন তো পশ্চিমবাংলাকে কিছু কম দেয়নি এখনো দিচ্ছে না শেষ হয়ে গেল আমরা শেষ হয়ে যাব
These changes have also given rise to a new human phenomenon, the emergence of the ecological refugee. As more and more people lose their lands and livelihoods, they are voting with their feet and moving towards cities such as Kolkata, adding to the already intense urban pressures there.
Mr. Danda, if I can ask you to bring out some of the social, the economic, the other dimensions of what we've seen, please.
Socially and economically, the impacts of climate change are quite visible in the Sundarbans. Not only people are having to relocate themselves on the islands, what is also happening is the agricultural cycle has gone for a toss. Paddy, which used to be planted sometime in May and June, is now almost into August. So by the time it is ready for harvest, the year is through, so there is very little time left for our second crop. And as that happens, people have very little choice but to move out of the Sundarbans. Women and children are increasingly being forced to migrate. They are being trafficked.
If you see the ability to emit greenhouse gases, Sundarbans is probably among the cleanest in the world. Yet they are getting a disproportionately high impact on their livelihoods, their natural resource systems. And this is the unique picture of a global change where the suffering of the greenhouse effect, human-induced greenhouse effect, and the root cause of the increased greenhouse gas pollution is not spatially linked, it is globally linked. This is a very global question that we have to address climate change as a global problem. This is the character of global change, where polluter does not pay. Polluter pollutes, and through a complex process, the global change affects people who might be or might not be connected with the creation of that pollution.
I want to bring in Ms. Aparna Sen. Now, you've spent some time in this part of West Bengal. You've filmed, don't know which is the correct tense to use, but the major motion picture there. You know some of these people. This is having a very personal impact. We want to bring it down from the global to the personal now. I'd like to ask you, what are some of the issues that this piece and your own experience you've taken away with, and what are the impressions it's left you with for things that we should be doing in this city?
Well, I shot only a small part of the film in the Sundarbans, but I was very struck by its beauty. I shudder to think that the island I've shot on, Barleygram, may not be there soon. I mean, this is just a thought that is emotionally very affecting, artistically very affecting. Some of the things that I think we need to address, what we can do. We need to create an atmosphere where children from school level can start understanding exactly how imperiled their planet is. I think that's very, very important. And one of the things that I was just thinking about offhand, which I was talking to Malini about a little while ago, was that we hear about aviation and how the greenhouse gases emitted right up there in the atmosphere, that how it affects the climate. I was just wondering, and maybe Jonto, you can enlighten us. What would, for instance, if we were to stop air travel within the country? I mean, I know it's not possible to do it internationally, but if we could have fast electric trains, which we could use for domestic travel, could that be a solution of however small?
Could I ask you to pause just there, because you've set up with a perfect cue for our next footage. Right. As you rightfully said, there are a number of things that should be done and can be done. In the next footage, we're going to see the scenes of Kolkata by the river, to remind ourselves of the very obvious fact that Kolkata is a city on the river. What is Calcutta doing to protect itself as a city on a river, vulnerable to phenomena such as sea surges?
To save the water, the national government and the state government jointly have programs of controlling discharges to the river. A very serious group has been formed, committee has been formed to keep watch on particularly the river Ganges in the stretch of the cities.
Professor Jonto, would you like to add your own thoughts on this subject of the city's water security?
The city depends very heavily on surface water supply from the river Hooghly. We have a long-term scarcity problem and short-term oversupply problem. In terms of the security of water for drinking and domestic supply, which is a very small part of the total water supply, I think there is not that much of reason for concern as the water supply for irrigation. Food security through water supply is one item that Ganga Basin might face in the event of a relatively quick decline in the surface water supply.
We're now going to be showing some footage which shows us of what happens on an annual basis. Everyone is familiar, Kolkata, with waterlogging. Earlier this month, on the 13th of August, there was a massive downpour in the city of Kolkata. In about an hour's time, we had 80 millimeters of rainfall, which was recorded, and it caused life to come to an absolute standstill in the city. Now, it's sobering to remember that our drainage system in this city can only handle rainfall intensity of 6 millimeters per hour. So, from a city authority perspective, Mr. Mukhopadhyay, if I can draw you out on what is some of the thinking. I understand you're not from the respective department, but in general, from a governmental perspective, how is the issue of the increasing waterlogging being addressed by the city? On the issue of transportation challenges, Professor Bandyopadhyay, if I can draw you out on that, and then we'll take a two at the table afterwards. And if you please keep your intervention succinct. Thank you.
The authorities who are really responsible to look at, they are up, they are challenging the issue like anything that we know. I mean, coordination between departments, working out projects, and planning for appropriate management of the water in this kind of situation. It is difficult, for sure. But they are doing the planning so that this type of catastrophic situations can be dealt in future if it comes up.
Professor Bandyopadhyay, if I can draw you out on the necessity for climate-relevant, climate-literal planning for both the handling of major rainfall events such as this, but also looking to the future for addressing a harmonious transportation system in the city.
Yes, I will first take the issue of transportation. A car will take you 10 kilometers per liter, and a coal-run steam engine will consume at least 100 tons of coal per week. So if you add all the steam engines in the world, add all the automobiles running, add all the domestic fuel use of both coal and liquefied petroleum gas, the kilograms of carbon dioxide that we produce runs into really millions and millions of tons. And that is somewhere there we have no capacity to bring that carbon dioxide back to carbon form and create oxygen, because we also have demonstrated our ability to polish off the surface forests. So this transportation is one major contributor towards the greenhouse gas problem. The new method of measuring relative advantage, disadvantage of transportation is kilometers, not per liter of petroleum, but per kilogram of carbon dioxide produced.
A few weeks ago, we had a seminar which was focusing specifically on climate change and transportation. Some of the key themes that came out of that seminar was that Kolkata is in a position to follow the lead taken on public transportation systems set by other cities around the country. For example, the conversion of public transportation fleets to CNG, as Delhi has done, with tremendous co-benefits for both climate change as well as local environmental pollution. But that there are particular political and administrative setups in the state of West Bengal which do not facilitate those kind of changes to the transportation fleet taking place. There are many other things that we can do, however. If you can provide us with perhaps a couple of suggestions or examples for what can be done in this state and in this city.
Yes, this city is going to expand very, very rapidly in the coming few decades, and its transportation system needs to again be based on the original arithmetic of person carried per kilometer. What is the effect on the carbon dioxide production?
In our country, and this is an issue of people's ability to be mobile, that people increasingly are able to and choose to take to the skies. As I was coming here, I saw a great big hoarding by a budget airline company announcing a cheap flight to Delhi for 1,200 rupees. I mean, this is cheaper than you can travel by train. Where are we going to with all this, and what is the responsibility of companies and ourselves?
I think it's just not only corporates. I mean, we as citizens also need to take up issues, start believing, and start acting. We take shortcuts. We as individuals take shortcuts. We as corporates take shortcuts. Shortcuts are no longer an option. I mean, in the context of climate change, I mean, I think we've passed that phase. Shortcuts are not going to work.
Definitely, a mass transport system is always something coveted for a big city people, and the mass transport system can take its birth if good corridors are maintained from one side to the other side of the city, which we see could be a viable options once all the flyovers come up in the city that is in the progress.
Earlier this year, the Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said that our future is in peril unless we change our lifestyles. He was addressing that not to Americans or to Japanese, he was addressing that to Indians, because we find that with greater affluence, we also want everything that comes with that good life. We all want cars, we all want houses of a particular style and type, we want Wi-Fi's, we want white goods, etc. In the city of Kolkata, what the changes in expectations means is that our city planners have to provide for the growth of the city, which in the next 2 decades is going to grow for the greater Kolkata metropolitan area from 15 million people to 21 million people. Now, we're going to be showing you some footage of what's on the anvil there, of the volume of construction that will be taking place and its implications for some of the surrounding area, in particular the wetlands. According to the Kolkata Metropolitan Development Authority's plans for Kolkata 2025, it will be building 2 ring roads amounting to some 200 kilometers of new roads, 3 new satellite townships in Howrah, Dankuni, Paripur, and there is of course the new development of 5,000 hectares in Rajarghat and the new town development. There are also plans for a health city in Sonarpur, which will be offering 100 hospitals with 50,000 beds, catering to patients from Southeast Asia as well as West Asia. A biotechnology park is also on the drawing board. Now, to give you an idea of the changes to the built environment that we can expect to see in the next 10-20 years, in 2000 there was just under 5 million square foot of floor space, both commercial as well as residential, built in the city. By 2005, this had risen to nearly 20 million square feet of floor space. And by 2010, according to the Confederation of Real Estate Developers Association, it forecasts that a gigantic 250 million square feet of space will be built in the greater Kolkata area. At present, there are nearly 50 large building projects coming up in the city, and at least 1,000 medium-sized projects, mostly 5-storied apartment buildings, including car park spaces in their basements. Many of these buildings, as you would have seen from the footage there, favor glass and steel construction, which trap heat and contribute to the urban heat island effect. Now, much of this development is also taking place in or near Kolkata, in or near the East Kolkata wetlands, which, as everyone here knows, these are Ramsar protected wetlands and the largest of their type in the world. We'll just see some of the... Do we have any more footage of that? Yes, please go ahead. Thank you. So as most people in the city know, the wetlands are the kidneys of the city. They act as a giant sponge, absorbing about 980 million litres of untreated sewage, and they recycle that naturally. They're also home to a whole host of wildlife and endangered species, such as the marsh mongoose and the mud turtle. They're also importantly home to and the source of livelihoods for millions of people, many of them poor. who work as fish farmers, vegetable growers, porters, auctioneers, traders, etc., etc. The wetlands help feed Kolkata. They produce 13,000 tons of fish a year and 150 tons of vegetables per day from small-scale agricultural, horticultural plots irrigated with wastewater. To ask you to give us your thoughts on what kind of considerations should the city's planners and the city's residents bear in mind when thinking about the future growth of this city?
A blind faith in growth without describing qualitatively the nature of that growth is a major problem. I always give this example that when the British established Kolkata, they left the Maidan open. And now we say that is the lung of the city. Now we are running a city which is of the size of an elephant with the lung of a 1-year-old child. We have not created any new lung. We have only enhanced the size of the baby to a size of a large elephant. But that elephant is diseased, as we know from all the statements here. So that is what has to be qualified. Is the growth socially equitable? And is the growth ecologically sustainable? So my concern is that in the existing planning process, there is very little social and ecological input, and those two factors are very important in any new fund commitment. Clearance by the Planning Commission. Planning Commission still uses measures of project assessment which is stuck in 1970s. You always talk of going into the 21st century, but your instrument of decision making is back in 20th century.
If the total development in Kolkata, in its city development, is done in a much more extended way with huge roads and facilities, we could end up with more GHG emissions in the entire process. For projects like the ones we are discussing here, they are being screened, stamped, passed, and implemented through the very strict measures and standards which are being applied through the particular notification that clears out this type of projects. And while clearing out, taking into consideration the environment impacts that are going to be made by these projects, the issues, most of the issues we are discussing now, are being taken care of. But I don't know. I myself am not completely sure whether the considerations are adequate and enough to tackle the GHG issues.
There are documentary films. They can be, films that are made specifically to propagate this idea. That can be done, and I think that should be done and shown in schools. But I would also like to say, above all, we need some sort of vision for this city. I mean, I'm not just talking about city planning. I'm talking about a change of philosophy. The city has undergone a change of philosophy because the city had a different mindset. And here I'm not talking about just sort of being, staying in the past. I'm really not talking about that. But you see, there will be differences between the economic status of people. I mean, we now know that there will not be one sort of equitable kind of, some people will have swimming pools, some people will have 3 cars, some people will have diamond sets, some people won't. We know that. What we need to question is the degree of difference. There has to be some sort of way. I mean, here in this city, people, even if they want to walk, they cannot. They will only walk when there is no option left them. Even if they want to walk, they can't. There are no squares, there are no parks, there are no places where you can come and, walk and then sit a little, or, go to a cafe. You see other cities all over the world. I'm not talking about how much they contribute to greenhouse emissions. I'm just talking about the life of the city. They can't take public transport because public transport is so bad. They take these auto rickshaws which emit terrible, terrible fuel. But I think if, just like the metro has demonstrated, that people will take a viable alternative if it is there, I think there has to be a change of vision, and I think the change of vision will also have to, as Professor Bandopadhyay pointed out, have to be also socially equitable. That we have to think that people who don't have purchasing power, they are also legitimate citizens of the city. That is very, very important. I mean, now we are the whole thing is targeted towards people who can go to malls and who have buying power. But I think it's very, very important to have a city where you also have spaces for people who are not so affluent to live with dignity, to travel with dignity. That's very important.
Civil society will have to take greater, not only action, but also responsibility in spreading, conveying messages. It calls for making a lot of noise, conveying a lot of messages, and taking responsibilities.
But we have enough time for a couple of very short questions, please.
We have been talking about climate change, or specifically global warming due to greenhouse gases. I would like to ask the scientist here, how significant emission of gases that deplete and make holes in the ozone layer, and how much does it contribute to global warming?
The main gases for greenhouse effect are carbon dioxide, methane. These are the two large contributors. Then NOx, various forms of nitrous oxide, and you can take ozone, but ozone depleting materials are not very central in the greenhouse effect, which is creating global warming, engineering climate change, and then we are having all these climate related catastrophes all around the world. The ozone depleting substances have now very comprehensively been stopped from getting into the atmosphere through a mechanism called the Montreal Protocol. And throughout the industrialized world today, you will not find any ozone depleting substance either in cooling instruments or in pressure cans. In countries like ours, we are supposed to phase off all such ozone depleting substances by, I think, 2010. So that problem has been taken care of, but the problem of greenhouse gases still lies ahead.
So right within the city, there is another huge project which has been tipped as one of the biggest ever projects in Kolkata, housing project. And in spite of the reports of different government departments, be it fisheries, be it pollution control board, be it environment department, be it everything, be it land reform, still the project goes on adding height in front of our eyes. So I'm not very sure that how the government is working on this line, but it's an important issue that we need to have a proper planning, proper urban environment centric planning for this city. Politics, I think that is a key word in today's city. If you talk about the planning of the city, and that is a key word. If you do not have the political, if you do not have the social will, I think it's very difficult for the city.
What I want to stress here is that India is on the verge of coming to the list of countries where it cannot increase its greenhouse gas emission anymore under the Kyoto Protocol. We are, with China, on the verge of crossing the limit where in the list of countries we can still go ahead, but in few years we will be in the list where we cannot anymore increase our greenhouse gas emission.
On that note, there you have it. This is the beginning of a conversation, not the ending of a conversation. We have a call for greater awareness, we have a call for greater action, and I would now like to thank the panelists as well as the audience. Please join us again for the next City Dialogue from one of India's great cities.